Matthew Finup, Executive Director of the Center for Economic Research and Forecasting. Bienvenido a vos. Welcome to vos.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's our pleasure. Let's start by talking about the idea behind the Latino GDP project, which has already produced over 30 reports about Hispanics living in the US, right? About their economic output.
Yeah, so our goal is to provide a factual view of the large and rapidly growing economic contribution of Latinos living in the United States. What these 30 reports demonstrate is that Latinos are drivers of economic growth and also a tremendous source of resilience for the broader economy. Now, the idea for this actually started way back in the 1980s. Our colleague, Dr. David Hayes Bautista at UCLA, actually did some of the earliest Latino population forecasts for the United States. That followed right on the heels of the Census Bureau adding the Hispanic Latino indicator to the 1980 decennial census. So with that new data in hand, David was doing these population forecasts, and he realized that what those forecasts revealed was that the economic significance of Latinos was not only growing, it was becoming tremendously important to overall GDP growth. And so that's as he was looking at those population forecasts, the idea was created that we really needed a summary statistic, some way to capture hearts and minds with this factual view of just how important the contribution of Latinos are in the United States. And so 8 years ago, we did the first US Latino GDP report. Subsequently, working with our partner, Bank of America, we've done a number of different reports now for targeted states and metropolitan areas. And then last year, very excitingly, we released the inaugural US Latina GDP reports. Now, just briefly, your last thing I'll mention is that what each of these reports document is that Latinos enjoy substantial economic premiums relative to non-Latinos in the United States. And we see this across a wide range of indicators, not just growth in economic output, growth in educational attainment, population and labor force growth, and that these economic premiums are a source of vibrancy for the broader economy. It produces economic growth that all Americans benefit from.
Right. And all this history and all this economic growth Latinos are adding to the country as a whole takes us to one of your latest economic reports that came out this year, where you discovered that the economic output of the Latino population exceeded the $4 trillion, right, for the first time. Could you give us context about this?
Absolutely, yeah. So the Latino GDP, so the direct economic output of Latinos living in the United States is growing very, very rapidly. In our 8th annual report, the 2025 US Latino GDP report, we actually mark a really important milestone where the US Latino GDP surged past 4 trillion. At $4.1 trillion, the US Latino GDP is the 5th largest GDP in the world. In fact, if Latinos living in the United States were an independent country, their economic output would be larger than the entire economy of India. So this is larger than India. And then maybe the most remarkable aspect of this is the continued growth of Latino GDP. So since 2010, among the 10 largest GDPs, the US Latino GDP is the 3rd fastest growing. But something really remarkable happened in the last few years. And that is that during the darkest days of the COVID-19 pandemic, and despite significantly higher COVID-related mortality, Latinos held up the US economy and just provided a tremendous foundation of support for the economy during that really difficult time. And as a result of that, US Latino GDP actually surged since 2020. And so since the start of the pandemic, amazingly, the US Latino GDP is the single fastest growing GDP among all major economies, growing even faster than China's GDP since the onset of the pandemic. And so their drivers of growth, a source of strength, larger than India and now growing faster than China.
Yeah, that's amazing. You spoke about Latino being a resilient worker, right? which other aspects would you say that the Latino has? Could you give us like a profile of the Latino worker?
Yeah, so what's interesting is I like to think of it sort of in terms of, what are those characteristics that we sort of see as fundamentally American, right? We think hardworking, self-sufficient, optimistic, patriotic,
Right.
and entrepreneurial, right? And across every single one of these categories, what we see is these are the characteristics that describe the Latino cohort in the United States. They're more likely to start businesses than non-Latinos. Their educational attainment, the number of highly educated Latinos is growing 3 times as fast as that of non-Latinos. These are just some examples. And so in one sense, you can almost say this is like a most American group, right? They really they just highlight all those things that we think of as fundamentally American. Because economic growth is fundamentally American, right? We care about economic growth because economic growth produces rising standards of living, greater social mobility. And so it's critical to understand what are the drivers of growth. Well, these reports document that Latinos are drivers of growth in the United States.
Right. I want to stop there with something you said. You've spoken about educational attainment, right? That Latinos have a high educational attainment. Now, this seems to be a new trend, or at least something not traditionally linked to or considered as a Latino value, right? But this, in your reports, this combines also with traditional Latino values, as you said, hardworking. Could you comment on this combination of traditionally considered Latino traditionally considered values and these new trends?
Yeah. So what's interesting, and what we document in the reports is that first of all, in the United States today, that a million Latinos are coming of age and entering the labor force every single year in the United States. And these are overwhelmingly US born Latinos. They are the children and the grandchildren of immigrant Latinos. And so there's this incredible moment in time where you have Latinos that are, they're American born, American citizens, fully bilingual, fully bicultural, and have grown up seeing the extraordinary selfless work ethic of their parents. And now they're coming of age and entering the labor force, but doing so with even higher levels of educational attainment than the previous generation. And that's what is driving this explosive growth of Latino GDP. It's sort of the combination of that selfless work ethic of the previous generation and greater human capital of this generation. And so we're seeing this explosive growth, and we expect that to continue for decades, right? Those entering the labor force this year, have 45, 50 years of productive work ahead of them. Right. And so this pattern that we're seeing is a very optimistic message for the U.S. economy going forward.
Yeah, and an optimistic message not only for states usually considered Hispanic, I'm talking about Texas, Florida, but also for other states, again, not usually considered Hispanic, as Tennessee, Vermont. Could you talk about this and explain the numbers between, for example, Tennessee had, and correct me if I'm wrong, a 60% growth in its Hispanic population in 8 years. Vermont, Maine, South Dakota all had a 55% increase. Why is that, and what is the effect of this?
Yeah, so I'm obviously sitting in California today, and so this is something that we just sort of see everywhere around us, because in fact California over the last several years, it's not only the largest state by Latino population, it's also one of the fastest growing. So it is the third fastest growing Latino population, just in terms of raw numbers, the number of individuals. But what's funny is that it's hard to compare a place like California to a state like Tennessee, where Tennessee has a much smaller population in general. So the question is, how do you compare big states to little states? Well, we look at the percent change. And so what's amazing is, if I were to just ask you to think, this sort of an intellectual exercise, think from where do you think the fastest growing Latino states are in the United States in percentage terms? you might think, oh, it must be Texas, Florida,
Yeah,
California. Well,
right.
well, no,
Texas, Florida, and
no.
California, which are
Actually, it's Tennessee, Ohio, Maryland, Indiana, so Tennessee, Vermont, Maine, South Dakota, South Carolina. And so the question then is, well, what is it about those places? Well, those are among the fastest growing state economies. These are economies that have seen very, very rapid economic growth. Well, wherever you see economic growth in the United States, you are going to see the dramatic contribution of Latinos.
Right. So let's speak about California. I mean, you are sitting there and you work for a university there. Please talk about the Latinos, how Latinos helped California's economy and the country's economy there.
Yeah, so first of all, I would also direct folks to, this year we also released a California Latino GDP report, so a California-specific report where we really do a deep dive into the California economy and the Latino component. And all of that is available at latinogdp.us. What's interesting about the California report this year is, first of all, we crossed an important milestone there too, and that is that the California Latino GDP surpassed $1 trillion for the first time. And so I think what's really remarkable here is that even though California is a very, very
like the sixth, right, biggest economy in the US.
It would be the sixth biggest state economy, larger than the entire state of Pennsylvania. That's right. Yeah, to give you a sense. And then even though California's economy grows faster than the US economy year after year, we still see this incredible economic premium among Latinos living in California. In fact, one big piece of news this last year was that in April, the governor's office announced to great fanfare that the California state economy had become moved from the fifth to the fourth largest GDP in the world. So the state economy is the fourth largest GDP. What's amazing is that if it weren't for the economic contribution of Latinos, California would be number 8. And so that's to say the incredible growth that Latinos are driving in California is literally elevating California on the global scale. So it's simply remarkable.
Yeah, it's remarkable. What do you see in the future for Latinos? What does this next year hold for the Hispanic community in the US?
Yeah, so it's an interesting time because we just got a Census Bureau data release with revised population numbers for 2023 and with new population and labor force numbers for 2024. And so what's really, really exciting is obviously our Latino GDP report reports $4.1 trillion Latino GDP in 2023. That's the most recent year for which the data is available. So the question is, what does 2024 hold? Well, the population and labor force data is unbelievable. Latinos in 2024 shattered new records. Just to give you a sense, first of all, in population, the Census Bureau actually revised their estimate of 2023 Latino population, increasing it by nearly 1 million individuals. And then on top of that, Latino population surged in 2024 to explosive growth, its largest population growth rate of any year that we have on record. Labor force data and I should add that change in population, the growth of the Latino population is driven not by immigration, it's driven by natural population change. So if we look at births minus deaths, that's what we call natural population change. The natural population change for Latinos has been positive in every single year that we look at since 2010. Even though it was negative for the last several years for non-Latinos, it remained positive. And so this tremendous growth in Latino population that we're seeing is driven by that natural population change, by births here in the United States. The labor force data is even more remarkable. So first of all, since 2010, the Latino labor force has been growing 7 times faster than the non-Latino labor force. And in 2024, the Latino labor force in the United States grew 5.5%. And that blew away the previous record, which was 3.8%. In 2023. And so that's to say, we actually expect to see the strongest growth in Latino GDP that we've ever recorded in the report that we'll be releasing in early 2025. And so the future is really, really bright. Latinos are a source of economic vibrancy. They're producing growth that results in rising standards of living and greater social mobility for all Americans. And so this is something that we all benefit from.
Dr. Finup, thank you for your time and for sharing your knowledge. Before you go, what final message would you like to send to los hispanos and las hispanas in the US?
Well, I just think it's really important to have sort of a fact-based narrative about the role of Latinos in the United States. And that's really sort of our goal, is to change the narrative. The facts are unmistakable and truly remarkable, right? This is a tremendously optimistic story for the entire US economy. Latinos will continue to be drivers of growth, benefiting all Americans. And so I really just encourage folks, visit latinogdp.us. You can download the latest US Latino GDP report in English and in Spanish. You can also browse the various state and metropolitan area reports that we've written over the years. And then I really encourage you to socialize this, share the data, because that's the only way that we're going to change the narrative.
Dr. Finup, Matthew Finup, thank you for being here today with us. Muchas gracias.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.